Do you see any particular platforms that you feel are performing better than others, or any particular approaches that are performing better than others right now, Joe?
The average American adult spends over 4 hours a day, every single day, on the smartphone, including 2 hours of that on the major social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. TikTok is obviously becoming a bigger player these days as well. That's where your market is spending a significant amount of time. And so that's where you want to be.
Welcome to the podcast, Monsters. I'm your host, Doug Bartlett, a serial entrepreneur, founder and owner of Bartlett Roofing. Welcome back to the Monster Mindset. Glad to have you here. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. Make sure you share with somebody if you have anybody that you think would get value from what we're offering here today. Just really excited to have Joe Hughes here with us and Ashlyn Bartlett. Ashlyn, you want to tell us a little bit about Joe from your experience?
Yeah, so we actually were on Joe's podcast a couple months ago, not that long ago, talking about the roofing company side of what we do at Monster Mindset, so Bartlett Roofing. And Joe and we've networked a lot through social media, and that's the beauty of kind of why we wanted to bring you into this conversation and have you on our podcast as a guest, is because that's the name of your game. So you own a company called Contractor Dynamics, which has been a big player in the digital marketing space inside the roofing industry, where in my experience, the roofing industry is very blue collar, right? So it's a space where a lot of roofers are maybe nervous about stepping into that space. But yeah, so Joe's the owner and founder of Contractor Dynamics. I know you're a husband and a father and pretty devout there as well. But why don't you just kind of give us a little bit more juice about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Good to be here. And your podcast, your episode on our podcast is super valuable. I keep sharing that out, those little clips, when people ask questions inside Facebook groups and things like that. Especially this time of year, everyone's got questions about hiring, which you guys have down. So thank you again for sharing your insights there. Contractor Dynamics, we started in 2013, been in business 9 years. I grew up in my family's construction business here in New Jersey and New York City as a 6th generation family member. And so got to learn a lot about small business, about construction, every aspect of a small business really. And it was a super awesome opportunity, really grateful to have had that opportunity. And I left the family business on good terms. I like to say that because I know people don't normally leave family businesses, especially those that are over 100 years old. But I really just had that entrepreneurial itch and wanted to kind of, spread my wings and figure out what I could do on my own. And so I had the contracting background, kind of grew up in that industry and had a passion for business and marketing and saw the need for modern marketing in the contracting industry. Which tends to be a few years behind the times when it comes to marketing and, software and tools and all those things like that are pretty commonplace in other industries. And so, started in 2013 and here we are going strong 9 years later. We've got a team of 9 and we're continuing to grow and just grateful to be in a position to be able to help so many companies. And our purpose is to equip people and companies with the tools to transform and grow. So that's what we're all about. And having a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. Joe, just so we can get this out of the way and just make sure if everybody, if people like the podcast here, what is your website? Is it contractordynamics.com? Or? Yes. Okay.
And our podcast is called the Nailed It Podcast, the business of roofing. Nailed It, the business of roofing.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So, I think Joe would probably be a great resource for any company out there that is in the roofing space or construction space and needing, marketing help. But I'd really like to dive into that a little bit and get to know you as a person, but also, what's the meat and potatoes that people can take home that they can use in their businesses, because we have a really complex and ever constantly changing world in marketing and digital marketing, the social media. It's super complex, and trying to get our heads around this is what are some initial steps that you would offer somebody that they could go out there and do and change or enact initially to really get the ball rolling in the right direction?
Oh man, there is a lot. You're absolutely right, and there's a lot of complexity in business in general, right? Marketing and sales and production and putting all the pieces together in the right order. So with marketing, I know it can be a daunting subject for a lot of people, whether you've never tried it or you've tried it and you haven't had the success that you wanted. One of the things that I'd recommend is really getting clear on starting with the end in mind. Like, what are you looking to build and why? I know it's a cliche response, like start with why, figure out your why, but it's really going to be the driver for like doing the work consistently, because you're not going to see the results in any aspect of business. Like the work that you do today, you might not see the results for a couple weeks or even a couple months, or in some cases like maybe a couple years, but you've got to have the faith that you're building something that's worthwhile. You've got that North Star that you're kind of looking to. And what we experience with a lot of like prospective clients that we engage with, they're just not clear on like why they want to grow, what they're building, what is that vision. And so that's number one, get clear on that overall vision. Number two, I would say, to drill down a little bit more, is get clear on like what you're good at in terms of your projects, whether that's roofing or siding or windows or doors or whatever else your focus is. Get clear on what you're good at and what those ideal projects for you are. And I know that like when we first start out in business, no matter what business you're in, it's like, hey, we'll just take on whatever comes our way. If someone wants to give us money, we'll figure out how to do that service and keep the lights on, keep the guys busy and that sort of thing. But then as quickly as possible, you need to get to the point where you're being more intentional about like, what are those projects that we can perform, that we can make a profit on, where we're going to get good reviews and good referrals, and then we can kind of snowball our business that way. That's number one. And I know that like maybe a lot of people are looking for a tactical answer there as far as what channels to use to generate traffic and leads, and we can definitely get into that. But I would be remiss if we didn't go over kind of like, that strategy, like start with the end in mind, figure out what you want, what those ideal projects are. And then, starting with the end in mind, you can reverse engineer, like, what do we need to do to get to that point? And it's never just one thing. It might be a combination of things, but at least you have that end goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's so interesting that you brought up like the reason why and it being cliche, but this is actually something that came up in one of my team meetings today, where we were using an exercise called the 5 whys. And it's like diving deeper, because initially a lot of people will give you like the surface level stereotypical answer. Like in marketing, it might be something like, we want to generate revenue, we want to drive leads, we want to get recruits, right? But okay, well, why do you want to generate revenue? Why do you want to drive leads? And why do you want to get recruits? And then taking that a step further and getting really down to like the nuts and the bolts on a very granular level of why you're doing this, right? So like, and that kind of brings me to a question for you, Joe, is like a lot of people I think struggle with seeing the value in putting the time and like the effort into the digital marketing space, coming from a blue collar industry and construction, since that's what you specialize in. Why is it important?
I get the hesitation there, because a lot of times in contracting companies, like the person that starts the company either comes from sales or they come from the production end, most normally the sales end. And so it's like, I can go out today, I can knock on a door, I can, generate a sale somehow. And that's great. That's an incredibly valuable skill to have, regardless of what industry you're in. Very few people have the understanding of it. Marketing is like this kind of like nebulous thing. Like, I don't really understand it. Therefore, I'm just going to focus on what I can understand. I can go knock a door and I can knock 30 doors and I can make a sale. So it's pretty straightforward. But if you want to grow beyond yourself, beyond your own ability to go out there and hustle and put in the hours, if you want to create leverage beyond, what you can provide to your company, then you've got to have some system to be able to generate your own customers. And I would argue that every successful company out there has some sort of a system to generate their own customers. Whether that's door knocking, whether it's social media, whether it's a combination of different things. But you've got to have a system to create that predictability, because if you don't have that predictability in terms of sales opportunities, then it's really hard to invest in your company, to hire people, to buy equipment, to invest in training. It's really hard to build an actual company if you don't know where your next jobs are coming from.
I like how you talked about the duplicity aspect of it, because I think that's the biggest thing. And that's usually, in my experience, when owners or like high level executives get to a point where they're overloaded, where they're like, okay, we need to like make this more efficient of a process, or we need to actually create a process, right? And so like digital marketing essentially and branding is important because it's duplicating.
Usually these people start as either salespeople or as tradesmen, right? And really, if you're going to go into business for yourself, you need to understand that you're not going to be a salesperson or a tradesperson. You're going to be a business owner. And that means you need to be able to understand those first two, but you need to put on that third hat. And that third hat is very different than just being one of those first two. As a business owner, you're looking at, can you hire people to do sales? Can you hire people to do trades? Can you maintain quality? Can you do marketing and all those other pieces?
This was the first business book I ever read, the E-Myth Revisited. You guys are probably familiar with it. And it talks about exactly that. It's like the business owner versus the technician. And I read that probably 15, 17 years ago now. Like that opened my eyes, and I can't say that I implemented it right away. It takes time, but like having that, knowing, again, that North Star of like, hey, I might be a technician now as far as doing the work, but I need to graduate to becoming a business owner instead.
What do you think the catalyst was for you to be like, I want to dive into this realm of industry in the digital marketing space?
Oh man, I don't know. I have a business degree from college, but it wasn't marketing, and I just was fascinated by the idea of like inbound marketing of like, hey, let me put something out there, and then that's valuable to people, and they can get educated and eventually maybe work together and things like that. So seeing so many companies that are stuck kind of like in that technician mode, and like in contracting, as you guys know, like it doesn't take a lot to move the needle because the bar is so low. Mm-hmm. So just doing a few simple things consistently is still in this day and age is still enough a lot of times.
I'm curious about something, Joe. Is the family construction business still in business, or did it end when you left it?
It's much bigger and much bigger, better than me personally. Yeah. So they started in 1894, still going strong. What's that, 128 years later? They're growing. I've got six. There's 6 Hugheses in it. Hughes Marine Firms is the name of the company. A few different companies kind of rolled up into one, but yeah, they're going strong. Yeah.
And what kind of work do they specialize in? They building ships or what? Marine?
Not roofing. So barges and tugboats.
Okay.
You can picture that, depending on where your listeners and viewers are in the country. It's one of those industries that is so very important to everything, but you don't think about it unless you know someone like me who was in it. But yeah, so like heavy infrastructure like bridges and piers and tunnels and things like that. A lot of government work, a lot of corporate work, mostly government work, infrastructure type stuff. So it was interesting. Yeah, I mean they're based in New Jersey and New York City and Brooklyn, and then operate from Maine to the Gulf of Mexico. Wow. So it was cool. Got to see a lot of different things.
What's motivated you to make this change in your life and to be at this place in your life?
As kind of like 30 years old, we're starting to have kids, my wife and I, and kind of that inflection point in life. It's like, okay, what does my life look like? And kind of did like my friend Dan calls it the corner office test, and this is relevant for anyone. Like if you're in a company, like look down the hall, whether it's literally or figuratively, like look down the hall, like who's that CEO, who's that boss man, like you work 20 or 30 years to get to that position. Is that what you want? You have one life to live. And I guess I just had that entrepreneurial bug, and that combined with the idea that I like to be, have freedom over time, and we're having kids, and I want to be able to take off when I want to take off, or, coach sports or travel. I didn't really have a plan. I would definitely suggest that. I just kind of jumped and kind of built my parachute on the way down. And so this is crazy. Within a 3-month period, we sold our first home, lost a bunch of money on it because we bought it in 2008 before the crash and sold it in 2012. Sold that, lost a bunch of money. We had our first child. I quit my job, started my own business without a plan, all within 3 months. Like that was, I do not recommend that. So that was stressful.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I was just going to add that I think that like pursuing this, like a good reference point to pursuing your passions and like really having to like want to get up and go to work every day and do the things that you can, because like I can relate to that, right? I'm in a family business, and if you don't love it, it doesn't matter how much job security you have, and it doesn't matter what you're paid, and it doesn't matter like what the opportunity looks like in the long term. You have to actually enjoy it and love it in order to be motivated and be consistent in what you're doing. And that's what I see from you on social media a lot, is that like you're extremely motivated. Like you're posting all the time on your social platforms about what you're doing in your personal life and your professional life to stay motivated. How do you keep that up on a day-to-day basis?
As far as the content, like consistent
the
posting,
content,
or
and also
the energy.
I think the energy too. Like that's something that I think everyone struggles with to some degree, is like we all get through these spaces in our life where we're just like going through the motions because like it's just what we have to do, and it's our weekly schedule or our monthly schedule, and this is what's planned, and right. But like you are always in a positive attitude from what I can see, and that's super refreshing, especially, and it's genuine. So especially on social media, it being genuine too.
I do have like a kind of morning routine that gets me primed to be in a zone of gratitude and, you know, excitement, even if I am tired. 2 days ago, or yesterday, what day is it? I was feeling like pretty stressed out and some anxiety over the weekend, and I posted about that on Monday morning, and that got a lot of engagement. Because it was, you know, I was like, hey, if I'm going through this thing and trying to like coach myself through feeling overwhelmed and feeling anxious about everything I have to do this week and not physically feeling my best, like I know there's other people that are going through that too. You know, I know it because we work with a lot of clients that are just, you know, overwhelmed. It's kind of, you know, comes with the territory. And so let me just throw that out there and be a little bit more vulnerable than maybe I'm comfortable with. We connect through our vulnerabilities. One of the guys I love is Craig Rochelle. Love his leadership podcast, and one of his quotes that I love. He says, "We impress people with our strengths, but we connect with our vulnerabilities." You know, it doesn't come natural to me to post those things and get vulnerable about, hey, this is the way I'm feeling anxious and overwhelmed and whatnot. But it's cool to have an impact and, you know, let people know that you're not alone. I think that you guys may attest to this. Like that's one of the biggest challenges of entrepreneurship, is like that feeling of like, you know, no one can relate because these challenges are unique to me, right? When you get into a mastermind, you talk to other people, like we all go through the same things. So it's cool to be able to build those connections, and that's what keeps me motivated. Do I feel like writing a post every morning at 6:45 Eastern when I post? No, definitely not. Like there are a lot of days where I don't, but my mission and our purpose as a company is to equip people with the tools to transform and grow. So the why is going to keep you going when on those days when you don't feel like it. Does that make sense?
I think that what you said a minute ago, you know, is really key. In fact, I was coaching one of my employees yesterday about vulnerability, and you know, the analogy to me is for that person, their invulnerability that they would display to anyone was their barrier, their shield that protected them. But what I had to point out to him is that same shield is also the walls that are limiting them from connecting with everyone around them. And so it was limiting their opportunity to grow, limiting their opportunity to connect, and ultimately just limiting their opportunity to be a leader.
If people feel like you're unreachable, you're just so far removed that it's just not realistic, right? Like if you're putting on this persona, like on social media, for example, because that's what we've been like referencing, of like everything's okay and everything's good. Like people know deep down in their subconscious that's not realistic. And so in the instances where you are vulnerable, it derives like a lot more of a bond and trust between people, right? Because we can empathize and relate to people. And so that's why that post, for example, got so much traction. And we were just talking about this, we were at lunch before this podcast, and then same thing, like the posts and the snippets that we put out on our socials, the ones that get the most tractions are the ones that are the most like emotional and vulnerable and real, because people relate to that.
Yep.
I'm still working on breaking down that kind of barrier. I had my first business coach who ended up being a partner in my business for a couple of years. We since dissolved that. His name is Tim, and he would always like call me out on it. And he'd be like, yo, if you're not open with me, not that I was hiding things, but he's like, if you're not open with me about how you're feeling or being vulnerable, then he's like, then I can't help you. But if you share with me what's going on, then we can work on this together.
What drives you each and every day, and how do you maintain that energy as high as possible? Is there anything that you specifically do?
I'm pretty structured, or very structured rather, in terms of like my week and my day. So every Sunday I sit down and I spend an hour in my home office planning out the week, like looking at the top 3 to 7 priorities, making sure that they're in the calendar. All my recurring meetings are in the calendar, putting any of the kids' sports games and other stuff, family stuff in the calendar, making sure that I have buffer times, like 30-minute blocks where it's just buffer in between meetings. Usually that means getting outside and taking a walk, getting some vitamin D, because that's important. I didn't always do that, and then I was burning out. So that's the weekly, and making sure that I live in my calendar, not my inbox is my saying. My phone is on Do Not Disturb 24/7. I know that's not possible for most, a lot of companies, but that's the way that I operate anyway. And as far as I'm big on my morning routine, so I wake up at 5:40 every morning. I meditate using the Headspace app. I think I'm currently at 355 days in a row, almost a year. So I'm really nervous about, breaking that streak in the next 10 days. So I meditate. I use I consume the verse of the day in the Bible app every morning. That's about 5 or 10 minutes. I read at least 10 pages of a personal or professional development book right after that. I read through my kind of personal vision and a statement and goals after that, called my dynamic legacy. And so that's, all in all, that's about a half an hour. I'm doing my morning post on social media. Sometimes that's already pre-written. I'm just copying and pasting it. Sometimes I'm writing it on the spot. So from there, I go and get my workout in. I work out every day, 7 days a week, even if it's just yoga like it was this morning. So by 8 o'clock, I am, I've done a lot professionally, personally. I've worked out, showered, cold shower, and ready to, attack the day. That's helped me tremendously to be intentional about that morning routine.
Sounds like a great structure that you've implemented there.
One thing that I was going to point out when you were talking about your morning routine that I noticed was that at the forefront of everything that you do that we've been talking about is your reasoning why, and that has been at the center, and you revisit that every morning in your morning routine. And so I think that's something that's really important that we've even been talking about in our leadership groups, is that you've got to have that in a place where you're reminded of it constantly so that it can continue to keep motivating you.
Motivates you, and it also helps you make those decisions throughout the day in the context of what is that vision, 10 years, 3 years out, this year. It helps you to say no to things that don't fit that, and say yes to things that do, and it guides your decision making.
Kind of transitioning a little bit more back to your expertise in the digital marketing space and where you bring value. I know that you consult clients, and like you said, you have a team and you're working to grow that team, which is really exciting. Where's the biggest hang up you see with companies that have started to play into that space, but aren't all the way there? What's that tipping point for companies to really make it a valuable revenue generating portion of their business?
We started in 2013, and through 2013 through 2019 ran Contractor Dynamics was a full service agency. So building websites, SEO, running ads, doing all those things. And mid 2019, we started to transition away from those done for you services into training, because what we saw was the clients there. So we had a lot of clients that were paying us, to generate them leads every month and do their marketing. And there are certain clients that were getting really good results. And then there are others that, quite frankly, they weren't. And I hate that. I never want to, even today, I don't want to take someone's money and then them not get results, right? So we developed we noticed that the clients that were getting great results, the contracting companies, were the ones that were they had skin in the game. They understood that they needed to take pictures and do videos and just show up to meet with us virtually on like, hey, what's going on with our marketing? Let's plan some things out. Let's review the report. Let's review the data, that sort of thing. As a contracting company, you've got to be doing some of the stuff you're on your own. You don't need to be doing like all the technical stuff. You can outsource that, sure. But like at least you need to have that strategy. You create content on a regular basis, showcase your brand, your team, your projects, your community involvement, all those sorts of things. Like that's what's going to differentiate you from the hundreds or thousands of other companies in your market. Like that's what's unique to you. That's the fastest way to standing out and to getting in front of the people that you want to attract to your company, whether it's potential clients or team members.
I like that a lot. I think there's, to your point, like a lot of people in many industries, not just contracting, that like view it as something that, or like, I'm just going to pay this much and it's going to equal X. And they don't see all of the other pieces, and so then they get a bad taste in their mouth because they didn't produce X like they were expecting, and then they try to pull out completely from the digital marketing space. And I'm like, you're missing a huge portion of business here and a huge demographic of people that you're not able to talk to face to face for whatever reason, right? Whether you're in e-commerce or roofing, like there's just, digital marketing is such a big player and people get so intimidated by it in general. And so I think you're right. Like, because it's an ever-changing space too, and I know this is something that we've talked about, you've got to stay current on algorithms. You've got to stay current on Google updates. You've got to, like, all of these things, that it's something that you've got to continue to sharpen your skill set. You don't just learn it one time and then you know it forever. It's an ever-changing world.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Do you see any particular platforms that you feel are performing better than others, or any particular approaches that are performing better than others right now, Joe?
The average American adult spends over 4 hours a day, every single day, on the smartphone, including 2 hours of that on the major social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. TikTok is obviously becoming a bigger player these days as well. That's where your market is spending a significant amount of time. And so that's where you want to be. As far as cutting through the noise on those platforms, like video, for sure. Videos, what is it, like 90% of communication is nonverbal. So like, you can see body language and inflection and tone and things like that. And really, like, what people crave these days is, and rightfully so, is authenticity. And there's no better way to, maybe in person is the best, but like outside of in person, face to face, like the best way to like show that you are, authentic is on video. Google is an amazing place to be as well, because you have a captive audience. Like the people that are Googling you are people that have problems. They need a roofer, they need a contractor, like, so they're actively searching for a solution. So if you can show up there, and if you have your process dialed in as far as your ad and your landing page and your follow-up and all that, like that's a fantastic avenue as well.
I like that you hit on the video stuff, because you're right. Like in person's probably the best way to build relationships because of all of the things that you listed. But with video content on socials, like you can be in multiple places at the same time with a video, versus like my physical being can only be in Boise, Idaho on this podcast right now. You know what I mean? But if I'm pushing out content, I can be wherever the heck I set the demographic to be, right? Wherever the geolocation is.
What you were saying makes me really think about like just kind of one of the tenets of business that I live by, which is if you don't own your sales, you don't own your business. And that has to be like, one of those things that you at least have to have an idea. I mean, I'm generally a fan of, hey, sometimes you do need to leap before you look. Like you need to dive into something so that's the way you really learn it. And I know that can be scary for a lot of people, but sometimes you really just need to dive in. But you do need to have an understanding, at least a fundamental or basic way of knowing this is how I'm going to get my sales. That is like probably the one step that I would say, you need to look before you leap, is make sure you know how you're going to get your sales. Figure out how you're going to fully fulfill along the way if you're starting out a new business. But I think that's where most businesses fail, and that's where you end up with a tradesman that just continues to be a tradesman, because he doesn't understand a sales process, and he doesn't understand how to fully like get his hands around and his head around what does it take to make a sale, and what is the cost of that sale, because there's a cost. It's not just like, oh, the cost of doing business is the materials and the labor. No, there's a cost of doing business in network or in marketing, in sales, and sales management, in CRMs. Understand the cost of the sale as a part of the equation of materials and labor.
That's so true. Yeah, and a lot of people don't value their time in context of the cost per sale, which that's a big factor for sure.
Yeah, and if you can whittle that down to something that's predictable, like comparing your time against something like, an ad that you're placing in a digital media, and then compare those side by side. Well, which one landed, or how far down the road did this ad get me to shorten my sales cycle, and what would the cost have been without that? And so you can learn to balance out that equation, actually make sense of it.
When I first started out, I was going to all the all the local networking events and chambers of commerce and things like that. And, just to kind of see what was out there. And I just thought that's the way that you did it. And no doubt, there are companies that's their primary channel and they succeed like that. For me, it came down to like two things. I was like, number one, this isn't really fun. And then number two, like it's hard to create leverage like that. I can sit at home and on my laptop and run some ads or, write some blog posts, that are going to generate SEO traffic and generate more highly qualified leads than going out, to a networking event. We're very selective on looking at the potential ROI because we know that, like, yes, being out there in our market, and I'm getting on the road in a couple weeks for pretty much a month, like that is valuable, but like there's always an opportunity cost, right? It's like I'm gonna spend $10,000 to go to that event. There's gonna be 3 team members there. Like, what are we missing out on that, back at the home office that we can be working on? So yeah, opportunity cost is huge.
I think, weighing that opportunity cost is important, and understanding that like your time is valued and you can set that at whatever you want to set it as long as you have a clear process in place. And I know we've had the similar conversations, especially in reference to like events, right? And sometimes things that you want to do aren't always going to be the most profitable. It's not one size fits all. There's a combination in the digital marketing space of socials and Google and other platforms available depending on what you're talking about. Like if you're going in the recruiting space, you're talking about like Indeed and Glassdoor, right? Or LinkedIn, right? If you're just going specifically like customer facing, I would assume like Facebook and Instagram, especially in contracting space with the homeowner demographic you're dealing with. That would be your primary, source of place that you want to spend your time. But at the end of the day, don't pigeonhole yourself into just events or just Facebook or just Instagram. You've got to be able to be a little bit of a master of all of the different avenues of lead generation. Whether it's recruiting or whether it's lead gen, brand building, like do those activities before you need the result. With you guys, your social media, your brand building content is what, attracts like-minded people to join your company. So don't wait until you need to hire to start doing those activities, or don't wait till you need leads to start doing social media. Most companies, most owners coming from a sales background, it's like, I'll go out and drum up some business today, make a sale today, that's immediate. Whereas marketing and brand building, it's more of like planting seeds every day. So that's a different paradigm than most people are used to. Delayed gratification.
Yeah. My personal, one of the things I would just throw into that is just understand your value as the owner of your business, which is, actually place an actual value on it. I mean, if you're not saying my personal time value is at least a couple $100 an hour, then you're not like looking at it as a business. I started saying, 7 years ago, okay, if my time's worth $1,000 an hour, that's the decision that I made. And that's the story I told myself until it became true. Right. And by doing that, I was able to look at all of my business very objectively and say, what's the time value here and what can I get done and what's the cost, and weigh that against the overall cost of the whole machine.
I'm just curious kind of like where you think the biggest trends are in the digital marketing space for this year, because things are always changing, but being that you've got your pulse on it, like good temperature check of what you think is going to be really influential this year.
Here's a big stat that we've been using a lot lately. 70% of the buying decision is made online before someone reaches a company or reaches out to a company for the first time. So they should be finding your content and your videos and your website and your reviews and things like that. Just making it easy for people to do business with you, right? Whether it's virtual presentations or digital contracts or using an app or one of the software tools so that your customer can always know what's going on with their project.
I have a question that I'd ask you, and that is, what's the single best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Focus on one day at a time. Focus on winning the day. Yeah, I mean, have the long-term vision, but focus on what you can do today to win the day.
Yeah, I think that's great. You win enough days in a row, and next thing you know, you got a year worth of meditation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Literally. That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Awesome.
Right.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you hopping on with us. It's been cool to kind of piggyback off of our previous episode on your podcast. Nailed it. But yeah, anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to tell you thanks for joining us, giving us a chance to chat with you, and well, I'm sure we'll catch up at some point at a seminar, or feel free to drop in and say hi anytime you're in the Idaho area.
Yeah, keep in touch for sure. I love hearing what you're doing.
If you have a mind for business or you want to grow, we are the podcast for you.